He charged at windmills, convinced they were giants.
Right.
He saw these humble inns as like grand castles and ordinary peasant women as noble princesses.
Mm-hmm.
But was he truly mad? Or was he maybe just ahead of his time in some way?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're peeling back the layers of one of literature's giants, Miguel de Cervantes' Don Quixote.
A true masterpiece.
Absolutely. Published in two parts, 1605 and 1615, it's often called the first modern novel.
And for good reason.
But it's so much more than just a comic adventure.
Yeah.
It's this deep reflection on reality versus illusion, the power of stories, and that human need for, purpose.
Yeah, it tackles some huge ideas.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the world of Don Quixote, the story, the insights, the legacy, so you can really get why it still matters so much centuries later.
Let's do it.
Okay, So where do we begin? With Alonso Quijano, a respectable middle-aged guy from La Mancha in Spain.
Just an ordinary gentleman, really, until the books.
Right. He gets completely obsessed with these old medieval chivalry books. Reads so many, he kind of loses touch.
Snaps, basically. Yeah.
And decides he needs to be a knight-errant. Like in the stories, Don Quixote is born.
Finds some rusty old armor.
Yep. Dusts it off. Renames his skinny old horse Rocinante.
Can't forget Rocinante.
And he invents a lady love, Dulcinea del Toboso, turns a local peasant girl in his mind into this noble ideal.
All in his head, of course.
Then he needs a squire. Enter Sancho Panza.
Ah, Sancho. The loyal, down-to-earth farmer.
Loyal, but also practical. He's lured by Don Quixote's promise that he'll get to govern an island someday.
A somewhat unlikely promise, let's be honest.
Definitely. But it works. And off they go, this unforgettable duo.
Hitting the road across Spain.
But Don Quixote doesn't see Spain as it is. He sees it through this filter of chivalric fantasy.
So windmills.
Fearsome giants.
Flocks of sheep.
Enemy armies, naturally.
And a barber's basin.
That's the legendary golden helmet of Mambrino, obviously.
It's amazing how consistent his delusion is, but also how the world constantly, pushes back.
Oh, absolutely. He gets beaten up, mocked, tricked.
Humiliated time and time again.
Yeah.
But he just keeps going. He never really gives up on his quest, does he?
Never. He persists. And then, in part 2, things get even weirder.
Right, because part 1 has been published within the story's world.
Exactly. So Don Quixote and Sancho are famous. People know who they are.
Cervantes is blurring the lines there between the fiction and the reality of the fiction. It's incredibly meta, centuries before that was even a term people used.
Totally mind-bending. But eventually, the adventures have to end.
They do. He's eventually tricked into returning home.
And on his deathbed, he renounces it all, says he was mad, regrets his time as Don Quixote.
He dies as Alonso Quijano, the sane man again. It's quite poignant, actually.
It really is. Now, look, on the surface, it seems like a parody, right? Just making fun of those old knight stories.
That's certainly part of it. The comedic element is undeniable.
But if you, dig just a little deeper, it's so much more.
Oh, absolutely. This is where Cervantes gets really revolutionary.
Let's talk about that metafiction aspect you mentioned. He breaks the fourth wall constantly.
He doesn't just break it, he plays with it. He includes fake authors, like Sidhemet Benengeli, the supposed Moorish historian who chronicled the story.
Right, and unreliable narrators. You're never quite sure who's telling the story or if you can trust them.
And then, as we said in part 2, the characters know their characters in a book. It's incredibly sophisticated stuff for the early 1600s.
Way ahead of its time. And this ties into that central theme, reality versus illusion.
Exactly. Which leads to the question, is Don Quixote actually clinically insane?
Or is he choosing to see the world differently? Choosing beauty, choosing justice, even if it looks like madness from the outside.
Perhaps his madness is really a form of profound idealism, a refusal to accept a dull or cruel reality.
That makes you think, doesn't it? About your own perceptions, how you choose to see the world around you.
It absolutely does. And then you have Sancho.
Sancho Panza, he's like the anchor to reality, isn't he? Grounded, peasant wisdom.
He starts out fairly simple, maybe a bit naive, just wanting that island.
Yeah.
But he grows throughout the novel. He sees the world. He learns. He even starts to sort of absorb some of Quixote's idealism in his own way.
They influence each other, definitely.
You could almost see them as two halves of the human spirit.
Yeah.
The dreamer, Don Quixote, and the realist, Sancho Panza.
That's a great way to put it. They need each other.
They really do. And Cervantes isn't just mocking chivalry. There's a sense that he's also mourning its loss, the loss of that kind of idealism, maybe. So it's both satire and something like a tribute.
Which brings us to these big, timeless themes that keep the book so relevant. Imagination versus reality.
That core tension.
The book almost asks, is it madness to dream big? Or is the real madness just conforming to a reality that maybe lacks soul?
It's a challenge to the reader, really. How much idealism do you allow in your own life?
And what about the power of stories? Don Quixote is literally transformed by the books he reads.
He tries to live out the stories. Cervantes is asking, can literature actually change us? Can it reshape our world?
Think about how stories influence you today. Books, movies, news narratives, social media.
They shape our understanding constantly, which links to identity, doesn't it?
Definitely. The question of, are we who we are? Or are we who we believe ourselves to be? Don Quixote believes he's a knight. Does that make him one on some level?
It's a deep philosophical question about self-creation.
And through it all, there's that incredible bond, companionship, loyalty.
Between Quixote and Sancho, yeah. It's complex. Sancho complains, he doubts, he even mocks his master sometimes.
He stays. He's loyal right to the end.
It shows a really profound, complex kind of friendship. It's not simple, but it's deep.
Okay, let's shift to the impact, because Don Quixote wasn't just a book, it was like a literary earthquake.
Absolutely. It's widely considered the first major Western novel to really focus on deep character development, on characters who change and evolve.
Before this, characters were often more like archetypes, right? Flat figures serving the plot.
Largely, yes. Cervantes gave his characters inner lives, contradictions, psychological depth. That really laid the foundation for the modern novel as we know it. Think about the writers it influenced.
Yeah, the list is incredible. Shakespeare, Flaubert, Dostoevsky.
Kafka, Borges, Faulkner. So many literary giants trace roots back to Cervantes.
And it even changed our language.
It did. The phrase tilting at windmills.
We all know that one. Fighting imaginary enemies, pursuing a noble but maybe hopeless or impractical cause.
Exactly. And the adjective quixotic comes directly from him, meaning idealistic, impractical, romantic,
Right.
often foolishly so.
You hear these terms all the time, don't you? Maybe describing someone's political campaign or a bold business idea?
For sure. And its themes, idealism, delusion, heroism, hope, the clash with reality, they echo everywhere in modern culture.
Novels, films, TV shows, comics. It's amazing how persistent its influence is.
It really speaks to the universal truths Cervantes tapped into.
Let's touch on a couple of those iconic quotes, too, because they just land with such force. How about, when life itself seems lunatic, who knows where madness lies?
Oh, wow. That resonates powerfully today, doesn't it? In a world that often feels chaotic or absurd, it makes you question what sane even means.
Maybe the world around Quixote was the crazy part, not him.
There's a possibility the book leaves open.
And then this one. Too much sanity may be madness. And maddest of all, to see life as it is and not as it should be.
That's such a powerful defense of idealism, isn't it? A plea to not just accept the world's flaws, but to keep striving for something better, even if it seems.
Well, mad.
Yeah. And thinking about his whole journey, it wasn't about winning, was it? He fails constantly.
Every quest ends in disaster, pretty much. Yet he's unforgettable, one of the most famous characters ever. Why?
I think it's because he dared. He dared to live according to his ideals, his vision, even when reality and everyone else told him he was wrong or foolish.
Even when he got knocked down, literally.
Exactly. There's something incredibly heroic, or at least deeply human and compelling, about that persistence in the face of failure, all for an ideal.
So, circling back to where we started, fool or prophet? Madman or visionary?
Maybe the answer is yes.
Yes.
Maybe he's both.
And perhaps we all are, in our own ways, carrying that mix of realism and impossible dreams.
I think that's what Cervantes suggests, that tension is part of being human.
So here's a final thought for you listening. If you've ever held on to a dream that seemed, well, crazy to others, if you've ever stood up for something you believed in when no one else did, or if you've ever just dared to see the world not merely as it is, but as you think it could be, then maybe, just maybe, there's a little bit of Don Quixote in you too.
Makes you wonder, doesn't it?
What's your windmill? What's the perhaps impossible, perhaps beautiful thing you're striving for?